Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today we have a very special episode for you. We're going to be giving you our top 40 Dynasty Rookie Rankings with tiers, including IDP.
Hike!
All right, Joe, for our audience today, we're going to be going through 8 tiers. Usually we go through 5, so we're kicking it up a notch by adding 3 additional tiers, and we're going to be going through 40 players. Joe, what you were about to say?
I was saying we certainly did ramp things up here for this one, Steve.
Oh, absolutely. And not to mention, it's including IDP. And, for those who are going to be wondering about our rankings, we made these rankings based off of our league. So our league is a 16-team league. IDP and offense are pretty balanced. So if you have a top defender, let's say a top defensive tackle and a top quarterback or top running back, they're pretty. Now, quarterback is, I shouldn't say quarterback. Quarterback is a league of its own because for us, we have it as inflated scoring for quarterbacks because it's the most important position in football. So for us, that's important to us. And so quarterbacks are very valuable. But if you have a top running back, receiver, tight end, if you have a top defender, it's going to matter. So keep that in mind as we go through it because a lot of times you'll see IDP like not even drafted until after 30 offensive players are combed over. So keep that in mind. Now Joe may still do that. I'm not as a tip off. So just keep that in mind. So Joe, why don't you start us off? Who do you got in tier number 1?
All right. At the number 1 spot, I've got Marvin Harrison Jr. At number 2, I've got Malik Nabers. At number 3, I've got Rome Odunze. At 4, I've got Jayden Daniels. At 5, Caleb Williams. And at 6, tight end Brock Bowers.
Okay. So for number 1, I've got wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. Number 2, wide receiver Rome Odunze. Number 3, wide receiver Malik Nabers. And number 4, quarterback Caleb Williams. So this is a very interesting tier. This is the blue chip tier for me. So in my view, I viewed these 4 players as the blue chip guys. I'm imagining you would say that these are 6 guys in your view that are blue chip players.
Yeah. Yep. That's why I decided to include those in my first tier.
So let's talk about a guy who, this will be a little bit of a surprise for most. I had Rome Odunze ahead of Malik Nabers. When it comes to Rome Odunze, I think, honestly, all 3 of them, Harrison, Odunze, and Nabers, are all pretty close. But to me, Harrison went to the best situation. Odunze was probably the second best and Nabers the worst. So I edge Odunze out from Nabers because I just don't like that New York situation. Whereas Odunze, you've got him paired up with Caleb Williams. If you think Caleb Williams is going to be, the next coming of the next best quarterbacks in the league, then you're talking about a hookup between those two for a long, long time. And to have that, that stack, if you will, that's going to be huge for his value because, we've seen you don't have to have a dominant quarterback to be a really good receiver, but it certainly helps, right? So for me, Rome Odunze is a very talented player. Keon Allen, he's a 1-year deal. He's out of there after this year. I don't see him sticking around. You got DJ Moore there. I think Odunze may become the alpha, where I think DJ Moore becomes a complementary piece. So that's why, for me, I like Rome Odunze ahead of Malik Nabers.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, honestly, those 2 are very close. Understand why you would flip-flop them. It's hard to I know Nabers didn't go to the best situation, but I just think with his talent and his possible ceiling with what he does after the catch and his explosiveness, I just couldn't not have him at number 2.
Oh, yeah, I don't blame you. When it comes to Malik Nabers, I like him a lot. His yard after the catch, he's such an explosive player. I think he's going to be one of the next great LSU receivers that came out of there. We talked about it before. I'm just concerned about Daniel Jones as the quarterback coming back from his ACL injury. I don't know how strong he's going to be. Then you got Drew Lock. What's going to happen there? You got Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, I believe, on the hot seat. I think, the owner Mara is going to be willing to get rid of him at this point. Then you're starting from scratch. I don't know. Nabers can be the most talented player in the world, but if there's not a system around him, it could be problematic.
Yeah, it definitely can. He is a risky player because of that. But but his talent's undeniable. And I guess we'll see what wins out because you kind of see it for fantasy purposes. Garrett Wilson, good wide receiver, solid route runner. He's gotten peppered with targets, but yet still just been disappointing for fantasy because of that quarterback position.
And that's a great example, right? We're not taking Nabers out of the blue chip tier. He's still a blue chip guy. We're not fading him because of that. I learned from that with Garrett Wilson, where I was like, oh, he's going with Zach Wilson. Good luck, right? So we're aware of that. One other guy I want to talk about in this tier, because we got a lot to talk about in this episode today, Joe, is quarterback Jayden Daniels. You have him ahead of Caleb Williams. He's a guy who's on the rise for me. I have him. You'll be hearing him shortly. But a part of me almost wants to bring him up. I don't know. We've been hearing some pretty impressive stuff. I know it's early on in mini camp, but I don't know. He's a guy on the rise for me. I think he's a guy who I think could be sneaky good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, look, I kept it this way because this is how I've had these guys ranked all along. I've had Jayden Daniels as my number one just because what he does from, his athleticism and rushing ability. Caleb Williams isn't a guy that's going to rush too much. So just the rushing edge, I'm putting Jayden Daniels ahead in his mobility. But even with that, though, I think he's a solid passer. A lot of people say he can process things. And Washington's got a decent amount. I know everyone's enamored with the Bears' weapons, but Washington's got a decent amount of weapons on that offense as well.
Especially if they trade for Brandon Ayuk. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, I mean, the former Arizona State teammates, they obviously you see on the X, they're talking.
Oh, absolutely. All right, Joe, so let's head over to tier number 2. Who do you got there?
All right, in tier 2 at number 7, I've got Brian Thomas Jr. At 8, Jonathon Brooks. At 9, Keon Coleman. At 10, Ladd McConkey. And at 11, Trey Benson.
Okay, at number 5, I've got Brock Bowers. Number 6, Xavier Worthy. 7, quarterback Jayden Daniels. 8, wide receiver Keon Coleman. And number 9, wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. So looking at the second tier, a guy. So it's interesting because you got Keon Coleman and you've got Brian Thomas Jr. Right, and we're gonna be talking about Xavier Worthy later, being that you have him later. But let's talk about Keon Coleman first. He's a guy for me that I was not high on. You know that. I was very concerned about him because he wasn't able to create separation. But his landing spot is so juicy. I mean, the target share percentage that's available. Stephon Diggs no longer there. Gabe Davis no longer there. Guys, he is very athletic. Josh Allen really hasn't had a receiver like him. So it's a possibility that they use him in a variety of ways. I think he could be very valuable. And for that reason alone, I felt like he was worth having it because I think he's got the potential. I know I leaned against him and I want to be proven wrong. But I didn't want my bias to not like him. I kind of felt like I had to course correct a little bit. You have him. You seem to like him. Obviously, you've got him decently high at number 9. I got him an 8.
Yeah. I mean, I've always kind of liked Keon Coleman. I know you were anti Keon Coleman until he went to the Bills, but I liked him in the pre-draft process. But then because he went to the Bills, liked him even more. Obviously, you said with the vacated targets, and they're just gonna have to throw the ball to somebody there in Buffalo, and I think Josh Allen's gonna really like being able to just throw the ball up to a nice big physical receiver that Keon Coleman is.
Now, one guy I had a hard time ranking was wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. I've got him at 9. You've got him at 7. If you look at some of his metrics and stuff, some things would tell you that you should be concerned. Other things tell you that he should be really good. He goes to Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence wasn't really able to get on the same page, I feel like, with Calvin Ridley. He's been very good with Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram had a career year. Do you think Brian Thomas etches himself a role in that offense? Because I think there's potential that he could be really good.
Yeah, I think there's potential just because I know they brought in, Gabe Davis as well, but we've yet to really just see him perform on a consistent basis. So I feel like I have kind of more confidence in Brian Thomas to be a better part of this offense than a guy like Gabe Davis. But as far as Calvin Ridley goes, like he needed Zay Jones and Kirk to be on the field as long as Zay Jones was playing for whatever reason, because then they could put Calvin Ridley in the slot. That like unlocked Calvin Ridley. He was really good, but when Zay Jones was hurt, it just didn't work in that offense. So for whatever reason, but I think Bryant Thomas being a bigger athletic guy, maybe won't need that certain situation. I think he can just, play on the outside and be like a wide receiver 2 for this team.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So let's head over to tier number 3. Who do you got there?
All right. And tier 3 at number 12, I've got Adonai Mitchell. At 13, Blake Corum. 14, I've got Trey Franklin. At 15, Latu. And at 16, Jermaine Burton.
Wow. Okay. We got to buckle up here. Oh, boy. At number 10, I've got defensive end Jared Verse. 11, defensive tackle Byron Murphy. 12, running back Jonathan Brooks. 13, wide receiver Ladd McConkey. 14, defensive end Dallas Turner. And at 15, quarterback Drake Maye. So now that we're in tier 3, we started to see some defensive players for both of us here. But let's shift over to you first. And we're going to talk about running back Jonathan Brooks. I had him at 12. You have him much higher than me at 8. Tier 2 versus tier 3. It's pretty close. What made you put him there? I mean, obviously he's coming out for the ACL injury. I think he went to a decent spot in Carolina. I think that the offense will be suitable for him. I think that the new head coach there, Canales, is going to figure out ways for him to get the ball. Was that kind of your reasoning why you felt like he was the 8th best prospect in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that, was interesting and liked in the pre-draft process, but then him going to Carolina and, Miles Sanders is there in Carolina to compete with him. That doesn't scare me. And I think once he is healthy, he's just going to be able to step right in and, be a starting role running back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get me wrong. I like Brooks. I think he's a good player, but in my mind, you have to keep in mind, this was, I think, tied or almost the longest that we've seen take for a running back to be taken in the NFL draft for quite some time. So that does kind of tell you, I think, in my view, what the NFL teams thought about this running back class as a whole. But secondly, in our view, when we were in a salary cap league, you're talking about having Brooks for 4 years. First year, he's coming back from ACL. He might not be right. Then you're talking about 3 years after that. Then what happens to Brooks? So for me, it's like to pass up on some guys who I think you could have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years if you wanted to. It's a tough thing to pass up. I don't think Jonathan Brooks is elite by any means. I think he could be good. I think he has the ability to be an RB. His best ceiling to me is a bottom end RB1. I don't see him ever being a top 5 back personally. I know he doesn't have a lot of mileage on the tread, so that is helpful. I mean, he hasn't done all that much in Texas. But that's my hesitation with him.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, but the NFL doesn't really value running backs, but in turn they're pretty valuable to have in fantasy, and especially in our league, there's not a lot of depth there, so you kind of just got to take your shot.
I get that, and obviously our philosophy on running backs is completely different. You've got 3 running backs in your top 16. I've got 1. So, I mean, we definitely have a different philosophy there. I mean, I do like those guys. I just think I don't value the position as highly because, in my view, look at Kyren Williams and Blake Corum, right? I mean, Kyren Williams was the guy last year. People were, all hotsy-trotsy about him and were so excited. Now Blake Corum's coming in, right? We saw that last year with Zach Charbonnet. We were shocked. Kenneth Walker was a young running back, looked real good. All of a sudden, the Seahawks go ahead and draft Kenneth Walker. So it's like any one of these running backs, unless you're a Christian McCaffrey or even like a Bijan Robinson, like a lot of times you're not seeing another running back come into that running back room. Whereas, anytime these teams could say, hey, I think this type of running back could complement our offense. So to me, I want volume. And yes, you could have a guy who's explosive. What we haven't talked about yet, but even look at the Dolphins. You talk about Achane. Everyone loves Achane. Then what do? They draft, the running back out of Tennessee, Jaylen Wright. So it's like now that complicates things. You got Mostert. To me, it makes for a precarious situation.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, eh, teams don't value it, so they constantly take guys, but it doesn't mean that these guys aren't talented, though.
That's true. Now, I have 3 IDP players right now in this tier. You only have 1. Now, I knew you liked Latu the best. I'm a little surprised you don't have Byron Murphy here. I just think that his ability to pass rush in the interior defensive line, he's going to be able to get sacks. I think he had the highest pressure rate for defensive tackles, or very close to all of college football last year. So in that Seattle defense with Mike McDonald, I feel like he could really just wreak havoc. Surprised you don't have them yet in your rankings.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I have. I don't even have him in the next tier, but he'll be coming up.
Really? Is that what's the reasoning for that? You just feel that he's not you think he's a flash in the pan type of guy? You don't think he's an all-around defensive tackle? You don't care about the position as much?
Yeah, I think it's just the defensive tackle position. I know can be valuable, in our league, especially because the depth isn't good there, but it tends to take those guys longer to pan out. We see, 2 to 3 years. A lot of times it takes for them to reach their potential. And I just like to prioritize the edge rusher position where we get a lot of points for sacks and things like that. And if these guys are able to get them, they've got the higher point potential.
I think you're going to change your tune next year when we have Mason Graham in this draft class. But we'll see about that coming up next year.
Yeah, we'll see.
Oh, if he's not in your well, anyways, we're not talking 2025. We're talking 2024. One other point quick here. Troy Franklin this early. I'll be honest with you. I don't think I have him. I don't have him in my top 40. So I'm.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of just gone through like our rookie wide receiver rankings. I had him ranked pretty high, so felt like I had to stick with it on this and, just stick to my process. So yeah.
That's definitely higher than even not including IDP. You are, from what I could tell, you are definitely in the top 5 percentile. Probably you are a Broncos fan. I mean,
my rankings came out before he was drafted by the Broncos.
It's true. It's true.
So I mean, I
cherry
just,
on top.
Yeah. So I mean, I just felt like I know like a lot has changed after the draft, and I didn't necessarily have to go with my pre-draft wide receiver rookie rankings, but I did take my rankings, rookie rankings into account when making this full list, and I had them high, so I just kind of stuck with it.
So Joe, let's head over to tier 4. Who do you got there?
All right, at number 17, I've got Xavier Worthy. 18, Ricky Persall. 19, Jared Verse. 20, Dallas Turner, and at 21, Jaylen Wright.
All right, at number 16, I've got defensive tackle Jerzon Newton. 17, wide receiver Xavier Legette. 18, quarterback JJ McCarthy. Number 19, safety Tyler Nubin. 20, linebacker Junior Colson. And then 21, wide receiver Ricky Persall. Well, it's nice to see that you and I now are back on the same wavelength here. We're at 21. We're going to be starting fresh at the next year with 22. But in talking about this year, I got to tell you, I'm a little surprised. You are a big JJ McCarthy fan. I'm really shocked that I have him higher than you. I thought I had him pretty low. You haven't mentioned Drake Maye or JJ McCarthy. But let's talk about JJ McCarthy. What makes you not have him ranked? I'm a little surprised by this.
Well, I mean, he's in my top 40. I just don't have him yet. But I just think I'm still not sure. Like, I think JJ McCarthy could turn out to be possibly a better NFL quarterback than necessarily for fantasy. And, that's why I even though Drake Maye could just turn out to be an absolute bust, his athleticism, I end up ranking him a little slightly higher with his rushing ability and everything. But I just think, yeah, I know a quarterback's a high value position. That's why I have, 2 of those guys in my tier 1. But we know this wasn't the best draft class for quarterbacks. So I just feel like, a lot of these other guys I'd put over them.
Interesting. You don't think it was a good draft class for quarterbacks? You're saying from a fantasy standpoint? Because there was a lot of there were quarterbacks who drafted pretty high.
There's a lot of them, but
6 in the first round.
I get there was a lot of them, but not everyone feels great about them. From that standpoint, I feel like most people really like Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, and then it was just kind of like the leftovers from that point. And we all know, even though there are 6 taken, a lot of them don't end up panning out.
I mean, I do agree with you to the fact that I think that JJ McCarthy will be a better NFL quarterback than a fantasy quarterback. And that's why I have him ranked lower. And for me, again, you could think of it almost like our league is a super flex in a way because of
Right.
how important quarterbacks are and it being a 16-team league. Some people are going to be like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is completely unorthodox. You would have all the quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know what I mean? Or not, maybe not Penix, but you're talking, or not Knicks probably either. But you're talking about those 4 are definitely in the top 16. I have one outside the 16. You don't even have him yet. I feel the same way about running backs, right? I mean, I've got one so far. You've got a bunch. So to me, it's like I'm not gonna. I'm looking at best player available. Obviously, there can be needs, and if you need a running back or you need a quarterback, just like in the NFL, you may make a reach here. I really need the position. I'm gonna do it, but I'm saying this is strictly who I think, and I believe how you did it as well. This is who's the best players available, and then from there, I can decide whether I want to reach or not. So I think for me, that's where it's like I can understand some might feel that McCarthy's going to a fantastic situation, which I think you and I both believe he is with Kevin O'Connell as a coach, Justin Jefferson, Trey Addison. He's got a lot of weapons. I just don't know if he's going to be a good fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the question. I don't, JJ McCarthy also wasn't able to show his full capabilities at Michigan just with what Harbaugh liked to do. He liked to really run the ball. So his passing volume just wasn't there. So I think he's better than what he showed at Michigan, but still just wonder, is he going to be like that dynamite fantasy player?
Now, one of the guys that is very notable that you have is Xavier Worthy at 17. You and I are drastically different on him. I've got him at 6. Which I think you're probably one of the lowest people I've seen on him. Is it just that because the Chiefs have had kind of a poor track record with drafting receivers and acquiring receivers like Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore? Do you think there's a possibility that maybe he's a gadget guy and that, or he's not going to, I'm assuming you're not thinking he's maybe the next Tyreek Hill, obviously.
No. I mean, we've seen this all the time. The guys that just run blazing fast speeds, they get it, teams get enamored by him, and everyone's just so high on him because he went to the Kansas City Chiefs and expects him to do well. Well, he's not the first fast wide receiver to go to the Kansas City Chiefs and not work out. Guys like, McCole Hardmans of the world have been there. He was supposed to kind of be that next Tyreek Hill type of guy. Hasn't panned out. Sky Moore, I know necessarily not the speed, but he was supposed to also be good. Just hasn't panned out. We see Rashee Rice do well. They have Marquise Hollywood-Brown now as well. He's also, speed is his element. So just curious, at least initially, just his involvement. And yeah, Worthy's never been a guy that I was high on him, and him going to the Chiefs, I know it moves the needle a lot for other guys, but I don't necessarily think that means instant success for him.
I mean, I give you credit sticking to your guns and just saying, you know what, this is what I think where he's at, and I'm going to go with that. I mean, to me, I just think he's got too much of a superstar potential. And that's why I felt like he needed to be up there because he was a good receiver. He's not just a speed guy. I mean, he was pretty productive at Texas.
Yeah. I mean, he was, but
he's more productive than Adonai Mitchell, and you've got Adonai Mitchell higher.
See, that's where we differ. I think Adonai Mitchell's a lot better than Xavier Worthy, and that's why I've got it as such. I think Mitchell's the better wide receiver. I know most people disagree with me, but I don't really care. Like you said, I'm sticking to my guns. I think Mitchell's better. He got
for
whatever
reason,
Quinn Ewers gave Xavier Worthy more catchable passes than Adonai Mitchell. I don't know why that is the case, but it led to some better numbers for Worthy. I still think Adonai Mitchell's the better wide receiver.
But don't you like the situation? I mean, like,
oh yeah, sure. Mitchell's situation isn't.
So you don't feel like Anthony Richardson's accurate. So aren't you concerned about that?
Somewhat, and I am. But I just
doesn't matter.
I think I believe in Mitchell, and honestly, I think it's more so. Like I don't really the other options that the Colts have outside of Michael Pittman, obviously. Alec Pierce. We've seen flashes from him, but it hasn't really worked out. And then, they draft Josh Downs last year. He's kind of a small guy, so I don't really believe in the other guys that Adonai Mitchell's got to compete with. So it's not like I'm trusting Anthony Richardson to have to, make more like 3 guys relevant. I think Mitchell could just possibly step right in number 2 outside of Pittman.
So one other guy I want to talk about real quickly here is wide receiver Ricky Persall. Guy you and I both have in this tier. And he's someone who, in my mind, is rising up the boards. I almost had him rise a little bit higher. I always thought he was a great pass catcher. He's a good route runner. In my view, was like, like we won't really see much of him from the beginning. But I believe what I'm blanking on his name now. Who's the NFL reporter? Michael Silver. Michael Silver. Yeah, see, I knew I would remember it. Michael Silver, he knows the 49ers in and out. And he said before the end of the year, it's going to be – because it was an interesting story where he had a post on Trey Lance, and I was like, basically Trey Lance is going to be, going to be like benched. And I was like, it's a rumor. And he actually even replied to me. It was like, it's not a rumor. And I was like, oh, sorry. I didn't
remember that.
I didn't mean anything bad by it, But ever since then, I'm like, okay, this guy's clued in because I thought Trey Lance was going to be the guy. I drafted him. But he got that right. So I'm going to trust him on this one. And he said Debo or Brandon Ayuk, one of them are going to be gone by the end of the year. No question about it.
That rating's kind of on the wall.
I agree. But that tells you that Ricky Persall is the future. I mean, Kittle's not getting any younger. One of those two guys are going to go. So McCaffrey's getting older. So, I mean, if Persall's going to have a lot of opportunities. I think he's a really under-the-radar player. So he's a riser for me right now.
I'm not so sure he's under the radar anymore. He's got a ton of buzz.
No, he got a ton of buzz. I'm with you. 100%. No more. He's definitely on the rise.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy. You were a lot more excited than me about Ricky Persall, but I can't deny the fact of the reports that are coming out. And, it's very easy that during like training camp here, even before Ayuk could be traded, it doesn't look like the negotiations are going well. He's on X and Instagram and everything else like that. So, Persall should definitely get a lot of opportunities.
All right, Joe. So let's head over to tier number 5. Who do you got there?
All right. At 22, I've got Jaylen Polk. At 23, Xavier Legette. 24, Javon Baker. At 25, Junior Colson. And at 26, Chop Robinson.
Okay, at 22, I've got defensive tackle Darius Robinson. 23, running back Trey Benson. 24, quarterback Michael Penix Jr. Number 25, running back Blake Corum. And 26, wide receiver Adonai Mitchell. So I got to tell you, you must have really liked this wide receiver class because you are peppering in wide receivers that I certainly don't have. We probably won't talk about them all, but I don't have Polk in my top 40. I don't have Baker in my top 40. I don't have Jermaine Burton in my top 40. I don't have Troy Franklin. So, I mean, this was a historic receiver class from what it sounds like. So you are definitely, hedging your bets when it comes to the wide receiver class, which is probably a good bet to take, whereas it wasn't as strong of a defensive class. But you got some explaining to do. Linebacker Junior Colson. I mean, this guy couldn't have went to a better landing spot. You know him better than I do, watching all his games in Michigan. You got to help me understand how you don't have this guy could be the green dot for the Chargers for the next however long you have Harbaugh's at the Chargers, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. How could you possibly have these New England receivers ahead of Junior Colson?
How could I? Well, I mean, I get that he was the top linebacker in this class, and I do think he's going to be very good. I don't know. I mean, this was a very deep wide receiver class. A ton of, there's a ton of depth there. That's really where it was. This isn't a very heavy defensive draft class, so therefore I didn't really have a lot of the defenders up in my top 40.
I understand that, but what I'm not getting though is you're talking about Junior Colson, who could be relevant for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and a guy who I think his ceiling, he could be a linebacker one. Where Polk and Baker, these guys could flame out. These guys could not even be anything. And so in my view, you're having those guys ranked higher than Junior Colson. That just seems wild to me.
I don't know why that's wild. I mean, we also see linebackers that haven't been playing that long, and the NFL teams don't really seem to be in that position.
Leonard,
Really the wide receivers. I mean, look, Devin White's young. He's already off of the Bucks. He's on a new team. Shaq Leonard's 28, and he can't even find a job right now. I mean, I don't know. Linebackers, I don't think are guaranteed anything either.
To me, the longevity is there. To me, all day long, best available player. If you're talking between Jaylen Polk and Javon Baker and Junior Colson, all day long, Junior Colson, I think, is a better fantasy asset. You've got to hope that Polk and Baker hit, and if they don't hit, then they're useless. Junior Colson's going to hit.
Sure. I mean, but we're also talking. I mean, you had him at 20. I've got him at 25. It's a matter of 5 spots. I know that I've got different players over him, but
yeah, 25 is a fair spot. I don't have any problem with issue with where you have him. I just think the players that you have ahead of him is very puzzling to me. So I'm giving you a hard time.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, they could.
You were giving me a hard time off air, saying like, "Oh, you got a lot of defensive players there." So
well, you do. You have a lot of. I mean, you've got a lot of defensive players that I certainly don't have in my top 40.
You don't have them in your top 40?
No.
Oh wow.
You got all these defensive tackles. I mean,
it's a premium position in our league. I mean, you're talking about a guy if they are able to perform at a high level. That's like saying, in my view, that's like saying, okay, would I rather have, would I rather have Justin Matabuke, or would I rather have, someone like Treylon Burks? I mean, it's like it's not even close,
now, but just 2 years ago, you traded away Matabuke probably for peanuts. You probably didn't even get somebody as good as like a Treylon Burks.
I'm just saying, you're talking about guys who I think could be low end, high end DT2s, whether it's Ed Oliver or Derek Brown, and you're saying you'd rather have guys like Baker and Polk, who at best you're hoping these guys end up being like a Jerry Jeudy maybe. So
hopefully they'll be better. Jerry Judy's been terrible.
Wow. Okay. My point exactly. I don't want to in the New England Patriots offense, let alone. But okay, we've been talking about Junior Colson long enough. We'll also talk about Trey Benson here. You and I are drastically different on this. I like Benson as a player. Again, I think it's just a philosophy difference. I have him at 23. You have him all the way up at you have him at number 11. So we're quite drastically different on this one. I think Benson's good, but you got to remember, in my view, year one, James Conner is there. So how much of a role is he really going to have? Then you're talking about 3 years. Then his contract expires. Then what happens? So to me, it's like you're only really looking at 3 real solid years. And who knows? It doesn't preclude the Cardinals to drafting another running back. And then he's splitting time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you could say that about a lot of these guys. And a lot of these guys aren't guaranteed a second contract in the NFL and this and that. I get that you're focusing a lot on the running back position, and you're right. The NFL treats them like they're a dime a dozen, but I still think Benson's one of the top. I know this wasn't a great running back class, but he's still one of the top talents in this class. And I'm not worried about James Conner. That guy can't stay on the freaking field. So Trey Benson's going to be just on the field producing for you a lot sooner than some may think.
All right, so let's head over to tier number 6. Who do you got there? This is uncharted waters for us here, Joe.
All right, so at 27, I've got Byron Murphy, 28, Drake Maye, 29, Marshawn Lloyd, and at 30, Roman Wilson.
At number 27, I've got defensive end Latu, 28, linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, 29, wide receiver Malachi Corley, and number 30, safety Cole Bishop. Well, I think it's one thing is very apparent that you definitely view running backs and receivers in much greater. Or not to say I don't appreciate them. Actually, receivers I do. Running backs maybe not as much as you, but you definitely don't. You definitely discount the defensive talent. No question about that. Let's talk about quarterback Drake Maye though. You've got him at 28. I've got him all the way up at 15. So there's a pretty big disparity between you and I. I think for me, I kept him there because of potential. I know you think he has a lot of potential too, but you feel like he's more likely to be a bust.
Yeah, I like his potential and his upside, but it just for the actual NFL, there's a chance that this guy could bust. And I think, he's probably going to get rushed into action sooner than he should, because the fact of the matter is, I'm expecting Jacoby Brissett to start. But if Jacoby Brissett doesn't get off to a good start and the Patriots aren't winning, then the fans are gonna be calling for the rookie. Let's see what we got. And I think he could benefit we all know he's kind of a project. I think he could benefit from sitting for a full year. I just don't know if Brissett and the Patriots offense is going to allow that to happen.
Probably not. I mean,
Right.
I would tend to agree with you on that.
So I kind of worry about his actual development, but as far as like his ceiling is really high with his athleticism and everything like that for fantasy, though.
But I just think he's so raw. I think he just needed a coaching staff to really help develop him, and I just don't know if the Patriots are that team.
Right. That's why I'm concerned about him busting, and kind of why I have him lower, even though we prioritize quarterbacks. I think there's other guys that you can get that probably will be more for sure able to help your team.
Now I have Latu at 27. You have him
Yeah.
at 15. We knew there was going to be disparity there. If anyone's been watching our episodes, they would know that you and I are quite drastically different on Latu.
Yeah. We definitely are. I mean, because you can't get the AJ Epinesa comparison out of your head.
I can't.
Yeah. This guy, I mean, Epinesa is not even that bad of a player. Like, what if the Bills were to give him, more snaps and opportunities? He could actually be a good player. So I don't know if that's as much of a knock as you think it is.
No, I know. I mean,
and I think
I
Latu's
don't think
the
it's
most
a
amount
knock.
of.
I just don't think I think people think he's going to be all world. I just don't see it happening.
I mean, I just think Latu's got the most pass rush moves out of all the edge rushers that are coming out this year. And, he went to a spot in Indianapolis Colts who they really needed another edge rusher outside of Kwity Paye to go in ahead and get the quarterback, and they got him.
All right, Joe, let's head over to tier number 7. Who do you got there?
All right, in tier 7, so at 31, I've got Malachi Corley, 32, Ben Sinnott, 33, JJ McCarthy, 34, Peyton Wilson, and at 35, Ray Davis.
All right, at 31, I've got running back Jaylen Wright, 32, defensive tackle Braden Fisk, 33, cornerback Cooper DeJean, 34, wide receiver Roman Wilson, and number 35, quarterback Bo Nix. I've got to be honest, I'm a little confused that you don't have, the next best quarterback in Denver, quarterback Bo Nix. You haven't said to me. I have him higher than you. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I don't have him in my top 40.
What? You ranked Bo Nix, I think, as your 16th or something. You had him high in your quarterback rankings. Your dynasty quarterback rankings, you had him really high.
Right, but I mean, I'm not. I mean, I didn't have him higher than McCarthy or Drake May though. So
I think you did.
I didn't, but I didn't just go any further than JJ McCarthy at the quarterback position.
You just don't think he's going to be a great fantasy quarterback?
I don't know. I mean, I think he's got all the
change. This is a change of tune for you.
Why?
I don't know. You were all, raving and, that Bo Nix is going to be this great quarterback and Sean Payton found his guy and blah, 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 blah. So
that's what I'm hoping. But in reality, I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, as a Broncos fan, yes, I'm hoping for that. I'm hoping Bo Nix is the next Drew Brees and Peyton has his guy and an ultra quick processor. But I don't know. What if he doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I'm not sure. Another guy that I want to talk about here, Jaylen Wright. I got him at 31. You have him quite higher than I do. You have him all the way up at 21. At least almost two tiers ahead or 3 tiers ahead of where I got him. I just think for me, I like the player. In my view, it's like how much of an involvement is he really going to have? I mean, he's going to be contending for opportunities with Devin Achane. Plus, you've got Mostert. I mean, again, it's one of those things where it's like, do I like the player? Sure, but I'm not going to, in my view, I'm not going to inflate his value when I think there are defensive players have a much longer longevity that they could play longer and give you points. So I'm a little bit higher than most, but I try to look at it from a best available standpoint. I just don't know how relevant Jaylen Wright will be for the duration of his career.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. But I mean, for as long as he plays, think he's going to be an explosive asset and scoring a lot of points.
I gotta tell you, you must be pretty happy about your draft because I've seen a lot of your picks here in your top 40. So you got to be pretty ecstatic based on what happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a reason I took those guys. I liked them. So
Yeah, I see that. So let's head over to our final tier, Joe. Who do you got in tier number 8?
All right, in the last tier at 36, I've got Jaylen McMillan, 37, Edgerrin Cooper, 38, Jatavion Sanders, 39, Cooper DeJean, and at number 40, I've got Cole Bishop.
All right, number 36, I've got defensive tackle Mason Smith. 37, cornerback Terrion Arnold. 38, defensive tackle Rook Ororo. 39, linebacker Peyton Wilson. And number 40, running back Marshawn Lloyd. So this rounds out our top 40. And we definitely learned a lot, going through this exercise. I'm quite surprised that I see you did get Cole Bishop in the top 40. I was going to be pretty concerned if you didn't have him at all. You've got him at 40. I've got him, much higher than you do. I mean, not really. I guess I have him at 30. I got him 10 picks higher, but I got Newbin even higher than you. I mean, you don't have Newbin in your top 40 at all. I've got him at 19. So we're drastically different on that. Is that just a thing for you with Bishop? Or in the safety position, you just don't value it. You feel like you can find him, a dime a dozen. So it doesn't, for you, you're not gonna have him higher rated as a prospect.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, I think that is a case. I mean, I like a lot of those safeties, but how much do you want to prioritize them? Because, like you said, I feel like a lot of them just kind of come out of nowhere. Like a guy like Cameron Bynum or, even Jonathan Owens was really productive last year when given the opportunity. So I feel like you can just kind of fight, especially guys that are just going to get that high tackle floor at a position like safety. A lot of them perform really well.
Interesting. See, I think those guys can be impact players, and it could be at the top of the game.
I think they can be impact players. I just think it can be tougher for those guys to differentiate themselves.
That's why for me, like a guy like Marshawn Lloyd, some people would probably be like, how do I have him so low? I've got him at 40. I like the potential for this guy, but we got to remember Josh Jacobs has a 4-year contract with the Packers. Now, it's really only a 1-year deal. They could get out of it. But again, what says that Marshawn Lloyd's going to be the Packers running back next 5, 6, 7, 8 years? I just don't, unless he's really good, it's unlikely. So you're talking about a very short window of probably about 2 or 3 years where he could be very relevant and could be very good. So to me, it's very situational. If you're a team that's competing and you need a running back, okay, maybe I take a running back a little bit higher. But in my view, the longevity for Marshawn Lloyd, who has had some fumbling concerns in the past, when he was at college. So that's the struggle I had, as far as, ranking him. I ranked him where I did.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I think, I don't know. He's a tough guy. I don't really know what to think of Marshawn Lloyd. Yeah, he ran decently fast. He's athletic. But they have, Josh Jacobs there, at least for now. But Green Bay does like to use multiple backs. Well, one thing I learned, Steve, is we're fundamentally different here. You've got a ton of defensive players. I didn't really have that many defensive players in here, which is interesting for, a draft class where the defense wasn't highly rated and even a lot of NFL teams prioritized offense over them. Just interesting. You had a lot of these guys, and just because they're defensive players and have the potential to have longevity doesn't mean that they're guaranteed that longevity.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have different outlooks, and I think most people probably are similar to you. I think especially others in our league probably think that way. Offense always kind of has an inflated view, unless you're talking about a really, really good edge rusher, or probably just an elite type of player that you just that would maybe could really affect things. In this type of draft, we didn't have that. But I try to look at it from a best play available. For us, we're playing a full defense. It means we're playing 2 DNs, 2 D tackles, 2 linebackers, 2 corners, 2 safeties. These guys are young players on rookie deals that I think can be impact players. That to me is very important. So yes, there's some receivers that you had higher than me. They could be good, but they're dart. Some of them are dart throws, like Jaylen McMillan. I mean, he's a slot receiver for the Bucs. With Mike Evans and Chris Godwin ahead of him. It's like, do I really think that he's going to have more of an impact? Than some other guys. I'd rather take a shot on a guy like Mason Smith, who, never really panned down LSU, has a ton of potential, huge guy. Like if he could figure it out, I mean, we're talking about a very disruptive defensive tackle that I think could be one of the better defensive tackles. And then if you get him, hey, now you're cruising. But I think nonetheless, you have to understand your league. And that's what I would encourage you as far as when you're thinking about doing your drafts. Probably most of your drafts have already happened. But going forward, when you think about drafts, know your league. What are the tendencies? You got a lot of homers. Maybe you live in Wisconsin. You got a lot of Packers fans. Be mindful of that. So even though, I have these guys as best player available, but I also have to keep in mind, like, okay, I may draft best player available, but if I'm like, well, I know the rest of my league doesn't view it the same way I do. So if I don't take this offensive player here, I'm not going to see him, even though I may view it as a reach. So you have to be aware of that. So even though for my internal kind of draft board, I know what I'm looking at and I'm monitoring it. But you have to be aware. Sometimes you have to go away from your board, so to speak, and you have to feel the room out.
Yeah. Well, I know one thing I've learned over the years in our league. Offense is a priority, and that's why a lot of us don't have good depth, is just because there's been a lot of teams with a bunch of picks. They've been loading up on offense, and a team like myself, I can find defense and, free agency and other spots, but you know what I can't find? Young offensive talent, and I think that's also partially why my rankings are more skewed to the offensive side.
That's true, and you've been burned by that a few times, so maybe
yeah,
that's
I've
happen.
Taken the best, gone with the defensive players, but like I said, it's just more easily to acquire those guys. Not to take anything away from the defensive players in this class, because I do think they're, good players. Just, with our league prioritizing the offense and just that need to get the young offensive players that guys aren't willing to trade. That's why my rankings are that much different than yours.
So that does it for this episode where we went through our top 40 rookie rankings with tiers, including IDP. Hopefully you enjoyed venturing out into uncharted waters with Joe and I, going into 8 tiers, and we usually stick with 5. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.